Hi, this is Stuart Nakbar with Educated Quest. With me today is Adam Miller. He is the Director of Admissions at Whitman College in Walla Walla, Washington. I think that's the only town in America where two names are together, if I'm correct. It was also a town for minor league baseball a while
So
back.
nice they named it twice.
And
Absolutely.
Whitman is one of the colleges that changes lives, and it is also a relatively selective liberal arts college. I liken it to many schools. In some ways, I liken it to a Williams or an Amherst, which people out east know about. In some ways, I liken it to Juniata, which is a little bit more uh, experiential than a Amherst and a Williams. And in some ways, I liken it to other schools that people in New Jersey and Philadelphia often consider when they want to have a more campus-based education. Adam, thank you for joining me today.
My
And
pleasure.
can you tell me briefly what makes Whitman stand out among other schools that applicants consider?
Yeah, Stuart, I think you actually hit on a little bit of it, right? Which is that in terms of maybe the academic caliber of Whitman, the types of students we attract, we fit into kind of that level of fairly selective, highly academic, highly rigorous liberal arts colleges. But for a variety of reasons, kind of maybe some cultural reasons, some geographic reasons, there's a really strong experiential component to what we offer. I think we do a really nice job of also investing pretty deeply into the support that we provide students. And because we're not super hyper selective, we're able to admit students that haven't had a sterling academic record throughout all of high school. They're very accomplished. Every student that we admit is pretty academically strong, but students who have had some bumps in the road are absolutely welcome at Whitman. We have really strong support for students with learning differences, and I think it creates a campus community that is really welcoming, is really supportive, is highly rigorous, but doesn't necessarily feel suffocating academically in any way. And I think that's a kind of a nice place for us to fit in terms of kind of the niche of, of who we attract, highly selective, but also being a fairly accessible place in a lot of ways. And then I think kind of on the academic side of things, we have some things that I think really do stand out. Our environmental studies program has 11 different majors housed within it. And so for students that are passionate about the environment and want an interdisciplinary education, there's a lot of different flavors to that. We've got this interesting global studies program that can lay over the top of any major that we offer. And then we have a really strong, STEM program across the board with really strong research opportunities. So I think those things come into play. And then maybe the last thing I'll highlight just off the start is our situation here in Walla Walla, Washington. We're in the southeastern corner of Washington state. And Walla Walla is a fascinating region. I'm happy to go into more detail about that. But we've done a lot of work in the last couple decades to build pretty amazing opportunities for our students locally and in kind of the general region that we're located in, that I think take that experiential thing beyond just some academic programs but really into the hands-on work off campus to build those career skills and those kind of other skill sets that'll kind of propel students into life after Whitman.
Now, the environmental studies side of it, of this, one thing I read is it's sort of combined with other majors.
Yep.
You could do that too.
That's right. Yeah. So all 11 majors, we don't have any one major that is just environmental studies. All of them have kind of an interdisciplinary focus, and so it's environmental studies and geology, or environmental studies and sociology, or the environmental humanities program, which is very unique opportunity for students to think about the environment, but in the ways that it kind of really overlaps with the study of the humanities.
So if it's combined with, say, geology or biology, is there opportunities to do research around a waterfront area or a
Mhm.
lakefront area as well as land?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we're our part of Washington State. We're in the Walla Walla Valley. So at the foothills of the Blue Mountains, which are phenomenal for folks that are outdoorsy and love to get out and explore. We also have a watershed that ultimately feeds into the Columbia River. And so there's research that we do kind of in the local watershed, but then we're only less than an hour from the Columbia River. Snake River is not too far away either. So there is kind of that kind of component of um, environmental studies, whether it's with geology or some of the other disciplines, thinking about the really complicated issues of water rights, of dams, and hydroelectric power. Certainly, we're also in an agricultural region. A lot of the local economy is fueled by farming, especially wheat, grapes for the wine industry, and so you can imagine kind of how environmental studies plays into the kind of the industry and the culture of the local area as well.
Does sustainability play into that too, given the academics and given the location?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, sustainability would be, I'd say, something that we would consider more of just a broad value that Whitman has, whether it's in the buildings that we construct or kind of the ways that we try to kind of embrace that. We've divested from fossil fuels. We have a lot of land that Whitman owns that we lease out to wind farms, things of that nature. So I think sustainability absolutely it's a value we have. And then the environmental studies programs would, I think, play into that as well.
How big a campus is Whitman?
Yeah, so I think about that in terms of walking distance. It takes about 15 minutes to walk kind of from end to end of campus. We're right next to downtown Walla Walla. And so that feels like a little bit of an extension of campus. So you walk off of, Boyer Avenue, which is the street that runs through Whitman's campus, and you're right on Main Street in Walla Walla. But yeah, the campus itself, most people who visit, we've had a lot of visitors recently as we've kind of established our COVID appropriate protocols for visitors, and they'll come and they'll say, oh, it feels a lot bigger than I was expecting for a school of 1,500 students. There's lots of kind of like nooks and crannies around campus, great like little study spots. So it feels kind of peaceful and serene. There is space, but it's not a huge campus. Again, you can get through it in about 15 minutes. That's pretty flat campus. We're on the foothills of the mountains, but the campus itself is on a pretty flat landscape.
Because I've been to like Amherst College, mm-hmm. and I've been to Smith, and if you turn one way, you're going to look at mountains. Mm-hmm. And is that kind of the setting? Whitman? Like if I wake up in the morning and I'm living in a Whitman dorm, am I going to see a mountain in my window?
Yeah, you're not going to necessarily see like mountains out of the dorm. So where we're located, we're surrounded by some really actually where students sometimes live as juniors and seniors. And so what you'll see are trees from Whitman's campus. If you're maybe at the top of a building, you would see over the trees to the Blue Mountains off in the distance. And then there are certain streets that run east-west. And if you're on those streets, you'll see right down the street to the mountains. But kind of on campus, it's not, I say we're at the foothills of the mountains, but it's not mountains right outside your door. It's mountains about 3-4 miles away. We're kind of in the valley.
I would guess then, given where you are, you're kind of far from major cities.
That's correct. Yeah. So, I mean, depends what your definition of a major is. We are about an hour away from the Tri-Cities here in Eastern Washington, but most people wouldn't consider those major cities. Spokane's probably the closest bigger city, and that's about a 2.5 hour drive. But we're 4 hours from Boise, Portland, and Seattle. So, yeah, that's pretty far from those cities, which are probably the biggest major cities in the Northwest.
Do you see people like who stop on the way thinking, I might want to look at Reed, or I might want to look at Lewis and Clark, and I'm on my way to Portland, or I'm on my way to Seattle, and they say, let's check Whitman out. Do you have that happen? Or do people come to Whitman knowing they're going to come to Whitman?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I cut out for a second there, but I think you're talking about families visiting, say, Lewis and Clark or Reed, right, or maybe Puget Sound. So yeah, it's about a 4 hour drive. And whether you're coming from Seattle or from Portland, really spectacular scenery. You're either driving from Seattle through Snoqualmie Pass, so through the Cascade Mountains, or you're driving out from Portland along the Columbia River Gorge. So really nice drives, great way to see some of the Northwest and kind of get to the eastern kind of side of the Northwest where it's a little less rainy, a little warmer in most of the year. So it's a really beautiful part of the world to be in. We do have an airport in Walla Walla that a lot of folks use to travel here. So if you're coming, say, from the East Coast, most likely, if you're coming to visit Whitman, you would fly to Seattle and then connect to the Walla Walla airport, which is just 5 minutes from campus. But if you're doing a tour of other colleges, yeah, you maybe land in Seattle or Portland and then do a little bit of a triangle. A lot of folks will do the triangle from Portland to Seattle, out to Walla Walla, back to Portland, or something like that.
Now, Whitman students, they're called Whitties.
Whitties, yep.
Now, what would make someone a Whitty versus becoming, a Williams student out here,
Sure.
or an Amherst student, or a Ursinus student, another college that changes lives?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think of Witty kind of less as like an identity that a student would have, and more of something that you adopt once you're here. And I think a lot of it comes down to Witties are these, like most liberal arts college students, these intellectually curious, bright students. But I think Witties in particular have this real side of adventure to them, right? I mean, you have to be a little bit adventurous to decide that you're going to pack up and move to Walla Walla, Washington. So I think there's a real spirit of adventure. Whitman's off the beaten path. It's about 90% of our students grew up more than 200 miles away from Walla Walla, right? And so when you think about who is at Whitman, it's mostly everybody from pretty far away who is gonna be outside of their comfort zone. And so I think there's that adventurous spirit. I do think that Witties tend to have a real kind of genuine kindness to them. We talk a lot about just the importance of being an inclusive and welcoming community to students from all around, but also to our community here in Walla Walla. So I think there's this really kind of really warm-hearted spirit that you get a lot of in the Northwest in general. I moved up here from and I love Southern California culture, but it is a lot less kind of intense and fast-paced here in the Northwest. And I've never spent time on the East Coast, but I sense that would be a little bit of a difference culturally as well. So kind of slower pace of life, a real appreciation for the outdoors and for nature. And you combine that with that kind of still the intellectual curiosity and the real kind of high-level academic goals. And it creates this neat concoction that makes you a Witty.
That's an interesting, you're taking an interesting chain of thought. Suppose someone comes from Southern California, they come from LA, San Diego suburb, or they come from a New York City suburb or Philadelphia. What are some of the things that they might ask you about Walla Walla that someone who is more used to the Pacific Northwest is already going to know?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest questions I get are, what's the weather like? And what do you do? Right. So those are the two big questions. Whenever I'm talking about weather, I confess that I still have not come around on winter, and we do get a little more snow than they do in Portland or Seattle. So that's a distinction, right? We're further east, so we get a little bit more of the extreme temperatures. Nothing like a Midwest winter, but we'll drop into the teens and 20s occasionally, and we'll get some pretty good storms that pass through. A lot of fun on campus, students building their snow forts and having snowball fights, and it's great for the local mountains where we have awesome skiing readily available. But we do get a pretty good winter, and then summers get hotter and drier here than most people would expect for the Northwest. It's great for the wheat and the grapes, but as someone who grew up near the coast in California, when it hits the upper 90s in Walla Walla for those few days during summer, it can feel more than what I was used to. It is a dry heat, but it does get warm in the summer months from time to time. But we have those kind of 4 distinct seasons, so that's kind of how I talk about that. In terms of what there's to do in town, I think a lot of it comes down to what I would say about almost any college experience, which is that, first of all, if you love the campus, you're going to love living here, because students spend a lot of time, obviously, in class, involved on campus. But I think the real value add of Walla Walla is how accessible our town is and how much there is to do, both for fun, amazing restaurants. We have a culinary scene that is phenomenal and gets highlighted in a lot of magazines, people who like to travel and do wine country types of food and dining. And so it's a really great place for parents to visit. you could be here for a week and not even scratch the surface of what we have to offer in terms of food and wine. But even for students, that kind of trickles down into really great kind of fast casual options, awesome coffee shops in town that cater to a pretty big tourist industry that we have. And then Walla Walla is a fascinating place in terms of what's going on kind of in terms of just societal issues and culture, right? We have a really diverse population in town. There's agriculture is a big part of our local economy. We also have the Washington State Penitentiary that's here in town, and we have some really great partnerships with the penitentiary. We actually have some classes that are taught, Whitman classes that are taught at the penitentiary that our students get to be in with folks who are inmates at the penitentiary. There's a lot of local service organizations that partner with Whitman to have students do year-long fellowships. So our students have some really meaningful work experience locally that I think we benefit from being kind of the primary source of college student work and employment to the local area, and it's a growing economy. So it's been just, I think a lot of our students walk away from Whitman having loved their 4 years at Whitman, but actually the thing that they're going to miss most are the connections they've built in the community, because they have mentors that have invested in them for 2 or 3 years, and they have meaningful relationships with members of the community through the service that they've done.
It sounds a little bit like Burlington, Vermont,
Hmm.
out here with where UVM is, even though obviously
Yeah,
UVM is a very big, fairly much bigger school.
right. Well, Burlington's an amazing place, so I'm happy for Walla Walla to be occupying that same space in your mind.
Um, what schools do your applicants consider most often versus Whitman?
Yeah, I mean, aside from the big state flagships, which are huge out here on the West Coast, so certainly some overlap, a lot of overlap with the University of Washington for our Washington State applicants, the University of Oregon, Cal Berkeley, UCLA, Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. So we'll get quite a bit of overlap from our West Coast applicants with those places. But probably the closer comps to us are places like Colorado College. That's one of our #1 overlaps. Attract students that of course love the liberal arts, often that kind of adventure outdoorsy spirit. It's a good fit there. We do overlap quite a bit with Lewis and Clark, Puget Sound, and Reed, as well as Willamette University. Those are all places that share some similar characteristics being liberal arts colleges here in the Northwest. Further afield, we see quite a bit of overlap with the schools in Minnesota, right? So Carleton, St. Olaf, McAllister. We get a lot of students from Minnesota here. And then, kind of beyond that, a smattering of the other liberal arts colleges around the country. I would say, we do get a lot of applicants from California. And so Pitzer, Scripps, Pomona of the Claremont colleges probably have the most overlap with us. And then, we do get some overlap with the East Coast as well. But I would say that, by and large, it's really, I think our strongest overlap is, some of the mountain Northwest schools, and then a little bit of the Midwest as well.
Kind of interesting because living in New Jersey, I live in a state people want to leave. And although we have beaches and we have mountains and we have a smaller state
Sure.
to travel through, and it's kind of interesting to talk to someone at a school where there aren't too many people from New Jersey.
Right.
And for someone from New Jersey, are they going to be shocked by people from the Pacific Northwest and the student body, and are they going to, feel that, God, maybe I should go back to New York or go back to Philadelphia, whatever?
I mean, the students who come here from far away, they tend to love it. I think, again, there's something about, the pace of life here, the quality of life in our town, the warmth of the student body, the faculty, are living in this town and love it. And, most of them live within a few blocks of campus. It's just an easy place to feel at home. Very few students are going to come to Whitman and then stay in Walla Walla for the rest of their lives, because they're going to go off to grad school and do other things. But alumni reunions are a lot of fun because people are so excited to get back here. And so I think that sense of family, that sense of community, that sense of being in a neighborhood and knowing the people that live around you is strong here. And I think it makes it really easy for somebody from New Jersey or New York to get to campus and within a few weeks feel at home. We see this a lot even with our admissions team, right? Most of us didn't go to Whitman. We all moved from other parts of the country. We have 3 or 4 of us from not me, but 3 or 4 of our admission officers came from the East Coast, and almost to a person, just the quality of life is off the charts here. So.
Now, are you getting questions from parents and prospects that you would not have been asked if there was no pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest one is what are you going to do next fall? The level of uncertainty about what the college experience might be for the next 4 years is something that I think people took as a given in the past, that they kind of knew what to expect out of college. So that is certainly a big question that we're getting. I think that in terms of other questions that are pandemic specific, I mean, certainly there's a little more. I think just question or concern about safety measures. And I think folks seem to be using COVID responses as almost like a proxy for the care and attention that Whitman provides, and like the thoughtfulness. As we've been kind of slowly reintegrating campus visitors, we've been very thoughtful about trying to do that in a way that both accommodates the demand that we know is out there to visit our campus with the responsibility we have to kind of make sure that what we're doing aligns with the needs of our community, right? We were completely remote last semester in the fall, so
Oh,
came back in the spring, and nobody wants to lose that. Our students are delighted to be back on campus. Some of them are still studying remotely, but our faculty and students love having their community on campus, and nobody wants that to be disrupted. And so we've been very, very thoughtful about that. And some of the feedback we get from prospective students and families is that while they wish they might have been able to go into a few more buildings or do other things, they appreciate kind of, again, the care and the thoughtfulness we're putting into that. And that makes them feel really good about how Whitman would approach other things that might pop up in the next 4 years.
so Whitman was remote last spring as
That's
well as this fall?
last fall.
And
Last spring, we moved to fully remote basically after spring break. And so some students stayed on campus because they didn't have anywhere else to go. But most of our students moved off campus and finished off the spring remotely
okay.
last year. And then last fall, despite in some ways our best efforts to hopefully be back on campus, we ended up making the decision to be fully remote, like most colleges out here in our region. So we were fully remote in the fall, and then returned to being primarily in person this spring.
Do you think you'll have a larger freshman class coming this fall versus the last fall?
I think so. Yeah, we had a pretty big number of students who took gap years last year, and rather than having that kind of just count against this year's incoming class, we think we're going to have enough capacity. We're fortunate. We actually have we don't have a housing crunch on campus, and we do have off-campus housing options that are really attractive for students. So we think we can absorb a slightly larger incoming class, and would be more than happy for that to happen.
You mentioned off campus. One thing I saw was about a third of the student body lives off campus.
Right.
Is that in homes, properties owned by the college, or is that properties owned by other parties?
Yeah, it's a mix. Quite a few of our students do live in campus-owned properties, but probably even more of them rent from local folks, including a lot of Whitman alumni who have kind of become property moguls in town and have purchased multiple homes that they rent out to students. It's one of the nice things, I think, especially for folks who come here from larger cities, is that housing is relatively affordable in Walla Walla, and so students can find really nice off-campus houses, these 4-bedroom houses with a backyard and a creek running through it and raised bed gardens and all those things. They're paying $300 or $400 a month for their living accommodations, and they can still be within a short 5-minute walk of campus, maybe close to downtown, close to some of the local food trucks or things of that nature. So it's a pretty easy place to find off-campus housing and still be connected to the campus community.
That's unusual for a school that small. Most they want everyone on campus.
Yeah, I was surprised when I moved up here. I mean, I've been at Whitman for 8 years, and was surprised to learn that not everybody lives on campus all 4 years, which was the model that I was used to. And it's, I think, part of the DNA of Whitman is that we've always kind of, in a way, welcomed the opportunity for students to kind of, again, branch out from campus and be a part of the community and yet still feel connected. I think that's the danger that can happen in some places, is students move off campus and lose that sense of connection to the community. But I think because Whitman is so ingrained into the life of Walla Walla, it's really natural for students to, leave campus at the end of the day and cross a couple streets and be out in a local neighborhood, but then come back at the start of the day. And it's a fun way for students to kind of try out some of the life that they're going to have after they graduate, right? They have their dinner parties at each other's houses, and they get a chance to know their neighbors, and some of them house sit and things like that. It really feels like an idyllic type of life for students that are ready to kind of be off campus and not be eating in the dining hall every day. Some of our students become really, really accomplished chefs. We have a great relationship with the local community college, which has a culinary program where some of our students even go and take classes, to beef up their skills in that area. So, I can't prove it, but I would say that most Whitman students are more prepared for that transition to life after college, just in terms of day-to-day life, than maybe peers at schools where they've lived on campus all 4 years.
If I wanted to pick a time of year to visit Whitman, when there was some kind of activity that brings the students together or the students and the community together, what would be that time of year? What would be that event?
So the first thing that jumped to my mind with your question was the Whitman Undergraduate Conference. It's in April every year. This year it's being done fully remotely, but typically it would be a day where we have classes canceled for a day, and it's really a chance for Whitman students to highlight mostly the research that they've done, but they can also give talks on other topics of interest for them. So it's basically a full day academic conference led by students, highlighting student work. It's open to the local community. It's a really great way to get a sense for what are Whitman students interested in, get a sense for just how bright and how motivated they are. Get a chance to see different buildings on campus and mill around. It's really a wonderful kind of celebration of the life of the mind at Whitman. So that's the first thing that would jump to mind for me.
And it's called Life of the Mind, is it not?
Yeah.
And would you say that the education that a witty gets will prepare them well, like for grad school or medical school, law school, things that they're going to have to go somewhere else?
Yeah, we have Right. Yeah. I mean, we have a pretty strong culture of students going on from Whitman into professional fields that do require advanced degrees. So, quite a few students go on to medical school, to law school, to business school. A lot of folks go on to get PhDs as well. We often, especially in the sciences, we get a lot of students that are feeding into, PhD programs at top universities. And Whitman has really nice advising for pre-health professions, pre-law professions. And I think some of those fellowships that I was mentioning earlier, just an opportunity to work with a local law firm that, where you get to work with them for 9 months, a full year-long fellowship, or get a chance to work with some local companies and kind of dip your toe into the water of banking and things of that nature. Just opportunities that are, I think, a little bit unique to a place like Whitman, where it's so easy for students to not just do a summer internship, but actually have that year-long experience. So yeah, I think great support for folks that want to go on to grad school. And about 60% of our students will go to grad school within the first 5 or so years after they've graduated.
Now, is there optimism? This is my last question. Is there optimism on campus and within the surrounding community that life is going to become closer to whatever the old normal was before the pandemic?
Yeah, we're pretty optimistic folks here at Whitman. Maybe not entirely happy-go-lucky, but there is this, I think, real sense. The winter has passed. The daffodils are blooming. The ducklings are, walking around, and it does feel like life is returning to normal. We have students on campus. Our town has. We've been in single-digit COVID cases for the last month or so, and we were a town of 35,000 people, so it's not a huge not a huge inn that we're working off, but still it feels like things are under control. And I think as a community we've really come together, and for the most part folks are really doing their part to try to be responsible. So yeah, I think we're feeling really optimistic. Of course we read the news, we see what's going on out there, and that news isn't so great everywhere else, and we wonder if that's going to persist here. But yeah, I think we're really optimistic that next fall will look a lot like normal, with of course the the things that none of us can totally predict, but what are the long-term effects on people's psychology around mask wearing and blowing out candles at birthday parties and things like that, right? Some of these things might just change moving forward, but we do feel pretty optimistic that things are trending in the right direction, and that we have figured out how to do on-campus education and to be here in a way that can be safe if we need to continue to maintain some level of social distancing and face coverings and things of that nature.
This Whitman is one of these schools that will do a lot for you if you give it an opportunity, give the school an opportunity, and you reach out to people, put yourself out there. That's what makes it one of the colleges that change lives. Adam, thank you for your time this afternoon. I really
My pleasure.
appreciate it, and I've really enjoyed this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate it.